Hey, it's Marcel. Got exciting news for you. News that some of you have been waiting for a few years now. My first book is finally being launched. Yep, you can now pre-order it on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Hey, if you've been listening to this show and you like what you hear, you're going to love my book. It's called Humane Leadership. Lead with Radical Love, Be a Kick-Ass Boss. I will leave a link in the show notes. Please go and grab your copy, tell a friend, and let's change the world together. Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey, welcome to the show, and I'm excited about today's guest, about today's show. So a couple of episodes ago, you will recall, I had Tom Fishman and Jesus Montes from Builders, the organization, and we talked about overcoming toxic polarization with the skills that they were advocating for, to get on the same page and bring people to the table and have respectful dialogue. Okay. So today we are going to stay on the path of building bridges in that sense and exploring all the ways that we can have these really hard and challenging conversations where we may disagree. Yeah. Without dehumanizing the other person. So to educate us on how to do that, we're going to be speaking with Justin Jones-Fosu. He released a book last year called I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. This is a very important book in the age that we're in, folks, okay? Justin proposes 5 pillars of respectfully disagreeing while at the same time pursuing other people's humanity. What? Can we do that actually these days? So we're going to dive deep into these 5 pillars throughout the episode. Okay, so who is Justin Jones-Fosu? Well, he's the CEO of Work.Meaningful. He has worked with and consulted with Fortune 500 companies on strategy, leadership, organizational development. Ebony Magazine even named him one of their 30 young leaders on the rise. He's an author, a workplace researcher. He's written other books, in fact. Your Why Matters Now, and also The Inclusive Mindset. And now, of course, I respectfully disagree. A former radio host and workplace contributor for NPR's The Takeaway, Justin is also a certified speaking professional, a distinction held by only 15% of speakers worldwide. But if you only remember one thing about Justin on this episode, let it be this. He's a proud husband and daddy first, a difference maker always, and deeply committed to educational initiatives for underserved communities in Ghana and also in the U.S. Because according to Justin, at the end of the day, those are the legacies that matter more than anything, including your title, your trophy, or even your TED Talk. Having said all that, I'm happy to announce that Justin Jones-Fosu now joins us. Justin, welcome. Welcome.
Oh, Marcel, that was bravo, Marcel. I'm super pumped and excited. I need to bring you on the road with me. You gave so much energy to that. It felt like you were giving me love in action. So I appreciate it.
Well, if we go on the road together, give me a heads up on that, because I need to clear my calendar for the rest of the year, because I know you're gonna keep us both busy.
Yes, I will. It's been very busy, which is good. Very thankful.
Very good. All right, so we start the episode like this. You ready?
Yes.
What's your story?
Man, such a deep question, man. Marcel, I love long walks on the beach. No, I'm joking, but even though I really do, But I think my story for me starts with my mom. And she's been a catalyst for a lot of this. Because we grew up, my parents divorced at 4, and we were initially unhoused, and then we grew up on welfare. My mom used to take us to Salvation Army to get our clothes before it became cool. And she would get like little sweater vests and bow ties because that's where she was trying to create a boys to men group. But the interesting thing is that even through the economic challenges, my mom still made sure that we experienced the beauty of difference.
Mm.
And so we would go to Oktoberfest and Polish festivals, the First People's Powwows. We would even go to events we disagreed with. And I'd be sitting in an audience like, Mom, we don't even agree with this. Why are we here?
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is she was planting these seeds of humanity in me. That even in the midst of our ideological differences, there's still humanity before us. And so what that transferred to is several different things. One, we have exchange students from France and Japan and Germany and Brazil. And as I grew up, and I thought I was really smart, Marcel, and I realized, nah, this came from my mom. And so I interviewed her for my last couple of books, and I was like, Mom, where did you get this whole philosophy, this mentality from? And I'll share briefly what she shared with me. And my mom was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And she shared that there were sometimes she'd be stationed in Japan for 2 years, and there were some soldiers in that same 2-year time frame that never left base. And she said, Justin, I don't want you and your brother to ever be like that. To never leave your metaphorical home base and not get to experience the beauty of people and cultures around you. And so that really, became those seeds planted. So even though, I didn't fit in, I wasn't Black enough for the Black kids, I wasn't white enough for the white kids, I never really felt I fit in. I was bullied, had dealt with some abuse things, a lot of different things. My dad really wasn't in my life, which he has represented that Ghana side of me. But it wasn't until 2004 that I realized I was never supposed to feel like I fit in, because bridges don't feel like they fit in. They are the bridge. And that's what I realized part of my devotion, my commitment, and my calling was to be a bridge.
Ah, man, that is so beautiful. So, and totally, and now I can totally see how all of those experiences kind of paved the way towards getting to this book and writing this book. Yeah. So let's bring the book into focus here. I respectfully disagree. Talk about it in your own words. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a relational book that it really it came out of my sessions. And so I would do, conversation around it, an inclusive mindset, and how do we just embrace, creating cultures that people feel like they belong, right? As leaders, as other people, it's not just about the big three, race, gender, and identity. It's about everybody. And I would make this statement in my sessions that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity.
Yeah.
And people would come up like, I'd hear this gasp, almost like what you did, like, oh yeah, it's good. And then people would come up after the session sometimes and they were like, but Justin, I love that statement. They would often get it wrong, but they would try their best. They were like, but how do we do it?
Yeah.
Or they would say, but what if they believe this? And I received those enough times that I realized as a leader and as an entrepreneur, let me listen to my customers. And so that's why I decided to write the book, is I wanted to help people of how to do it and to even address the question, but what if they believe this? And so I wrote it for the everyday person. I wrote it for not just leaders, but for people at work and at home and in their communities. I wrote it from a very vulnerable place. I share where I have messed up and where I still am currently messing up. and but I also wanted to be one research based and very practical, because a lot of times, let me give you a great example. People say you just need to be more curious about people. Well, people know that already, right? It's not something that we need to say. Just be more curious. We need to build up habit formations in people to help them to be more curious. And so we're intentional about how do we give people strategic, practical ways to lean into the concepts that we're talking about that will have long lasting impact. And so that's what the book's all about.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into that, and we will, folks. Yeah, I want to still kind of wrestle with the why of what's happening. It seems like For me, I've been part of these disrespectful disagreements. I
Me
guess
too.
for me, it started I mean, I've always had it, but it wasn't
Yeah.
super amplified until 2020. And it became hard to have constructive dialogue without people taking things personally, and then things get heated, and then we dehumanize the other person and cut them out of our lives. I've been cut off of people's lives because of political differences, or the whole COVID thing and vaccines and all that, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's bizarre that that all came to a head around 2020, 2021, et cetera, but it's still sort of, we're still there, right? So I guess I wanna just kind of get people to understand, well, why is this happening and what are we doing wrong here?
Yeah. So there's a lot of whys. I do feel like people felt the amplification in 2020, but this has been happening for a long time.
Yeah,
In our homes, in our society. One of the things that's been an amplifying voice of it has been the increased use of social media. And what we found during COVID is that more people were spending more time on social media because they were at work, the not in the office, so they had more time to be on there. And then what ends up happening is this it's the worst place of communication. And we allowed the loudest voices and the algorithms to impact how we engaged. And so it was just a bevy of monologues.
yeah,
And it really wasn't true constructive dialogue because people are just sharing their view and expecting likes and comments, or they would share it in a way that was antagonizing. And that was the whole purpose.
yeah,
And versus actually having true, meaningful conversation and dialogues with people. And so I think one is our use of social media to have these types of conversations. Our research shows that it is the worst place, right? It's you can't understand tone. You
mm,
can't you can't understand what person's intent. Were they being sarcastic? Were they trying to be funny? Were they all these things? I don't even care how many emojis you use. People will read into that. What the research says, which was actually surprising, is that you only need audio, not even a video, but audio to better understand what a person's true intent behind what they're saying is.
yeah,
And so one of the things I do is I don't have these conversations on social media. So when somebody begins going that direction, I say, first, can we take a direct message? Because I want to avoid the audience, because sometimes people are playing to the audience.
right,
And then the second piece of that is I try my best if we can do an audio. So I'll leave an audio message and ask them to leave an audio message back. Or if the social media platform allows for us to connect without the video, sometimes with it, to have those meaningful dialogues. And I've had some conversations that have actually transformed how I show up. And I've heard people in a different way. And so I think our mode of communication and not engaging in real life conversations with people that we disagree with has actually continued to hurt us.
yeah. That is so key. One of the things that stood out for me early in the book, you talked about the four responses
Yeah.
of conversational conflict. I'm wondering if you could touch on those, and then the goal is respectful disagreement, and
Yes.
that's counterintuitive for a lot of people. Can we actually do that both? But talk about the other ways that we may be responding that are not right either.
Yeah. So it's based upon both agreement and disagreement, as well as a respectful or disrespectful. And so that's where we found, really our matrix or quadrants.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's really two quadrants that are meaningful for our conversation, because respectful disagreement is a goal. Respectfully and agreeing, we're good with that. But disrespectful disagreement is where I really wanted to dig into, and I started digging into the research, and because that's who I am. I'm a disrespectful disagreeer, and so you're stupid, you're wrong, you're dumb. I can lean into dehumanizing people and really belittling them in my communication, especially if I disagree with you. And so I was like, how do I help myself first? Spend more time in respectful disagreement. Not be perfect, because I still am not. But what I didn't realize, Marcel, there was a whole other category that existed as we dug deeper into the research, and that is a place that we call disrespectful agreement. And this respectful agreement may happen on two fronts, right? It's a spectrum, but one front, it could be we could be in a meeting and I'm like, Marcel, that was a really good idea for our team and our department. Wow, impressive, Marcel. But then behind your back, I say to Sally, what was Marcel thinking? That was stupid. Why we wouldn't even do that? Like, why would he? Oh, that's Marcel, great idea, man. And so in the moment, I know that doesn't happen in any of your listeners' companies, but just in the places I've gone, is that we agree with people, but we disrespect them behind their back.
Ugh.
But on the other side of that exists where you might have grown up in a society, a family, a culture that taught you that children should be seen and not heard. And you try to avoid conflict at all costs. And so even when authentically asked for your perspective, you stay silent because you just want to keep the peace, you not rock the boat. And so you're agreeing, but you're disrespecting yourself because you're not sharing your truth and love. And both of those are places that we find people, lean into. And our goal is to spend more time, no matter what, in respectful disagreement.
Do you think it's getting worse with our current generation and raising kids now that are, in elementary school, middle school, before they become young adults, where we are keeping them from expressing these views, and even of building up the skills of healthy conflict management to respectfully disagree because we don't want their feelings to be hurt?
Yeah, I think on two fronts is being impacted. One, we don't want their feelings to be hurt, and I think the second is we try to minimize all conflict that they go through. And I realized the conflict I went through as a young person, yes, even some of the bad things have helped to shape me to handle the conflict today. It's why we say, hey, you need some germs to deal with not being sick, right? There's the parts of those things. You need some of the bad stuff in order to be good. And so I think because we've tried to kind of create these bubbles and avoid these conflicts at all times, it has the potential to hurt us. But what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a resurgence of people really creating these spaces for healthy conversations for young people, whether it's curiosity circles or these constructive dialogue moments. And so I think that there are efforts to kind of challenge that.
Yeah. Okay. So the goal, and here's what we're after, folks, again, is respectful disagreement. It's the ability to disagree while humanizing others as well as yourself, right, Justin? You can't forget about yourself as well, because the whole point here is if you're going to dehumanize somebody, you're doing it to yourself as well. So
100%.
Flip the script.
Yeah, and I do want to touch base. But one of the things that we had to do, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, we had to disagree with the late Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
And in her song R-E-S-P-E-C-T, right, which I don't know the rest of the words, but how much respect did she say we needed, Marcel? Do you remember?
I don't recall, but
yeah, she said just a little bit.
Oh, gotcha. Yes.
Right, yeah. And I'm sad to say we don't need a little bit; we need a whole lot of it.
Yeah.
And one of the first things we had to do is respect is one of those terms that we just throw around. We just need to respect each other, but we don't know what that means because every single person defines respect in very different ways.
Yeah.
And so we took what we call we started doing research on how does society normally define respect, and what we now call how we redefined it in what we call the 10 characteristics of golden respect. I'm not going to go through all 10, but I want to call out 3 that are really essential.
Yeah.
Because it frames how we approach this work. Number 1 is you must earn respect. And we started asking, where did this come from? Why can't we freely choose to give respect? Because every single person is worthy of value, dignity, and respect. It's our choice. It's not something they have to earn. Because I'm the only person I can control.
Yeah.
So why can't I freely choose to give it? Number 2 is that we've often conflated honor and respect. So the societal view is, that you must honor the person that you respect. And we're saying, no. Honor and respect are 2 different things. Honor is where you hold them in high regard. Respect is a choice. So you can have somebody lose a place of honor, but they can't lose respect, because if it's our choice to give it to them, it's not theirs to lose or gain. It's ours to give or not. And last but not least is that a person's title grants them respect, right? I'm a leader. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been for the company for this long. And we've challenged that and said, it's not your title. It's a person's humanity that grants them respect. And so if we are able to embody that, one, it's a choice, that everybody's worthy of it, and that we can give it to people, whether they give it back to us or not, that's the difference about respectful disagreement.
Okay, I want to bring this to the workplace and leadership at work. Okay, so I want to quote you from the book, page 45. And here it is. When we're secure in who we are as leaders, we are able to encourage respectful dissent, which is not the same as always agreeing from our colleagues and reports. We have a responsibility to encourage a culture of respectful disagreement instead of seeking constant validation. Okay, what stood out for me first? Let's bring out the two words that really just like bam hit me right across the forehead here is encourage respectful dissent. Talk about that. Why is that so important? How do we do it?
Yeah. Think about the things in our society that have manifested. They've all come from a sense of healthy conflict. So one, we have to change this perspective that a conflict is bad. Conflict can be bad, but conflict can also be amazingly good. And so when we as leaders can create cultures of this place of dissent, this healthy, respectful dissent, it allows us to get to ideas and creativity and have innovation and collaboration in ways that we never thought we could. So you may say, how do we do it? So I'm going to give 3 ways. There's more than 3 ways, but here are 3 practical ways to do this for a leader. The number one is going to sound so simple, but very few people do it. Encourage your team to disagree with you. Openly. State it. In a meeting, hey, we're about to talk about said topic. I have a view on it, but I want you all to disagree with me on this topic and share why you feel like this won't work. Why is that important? Because oftentimes in power dynamics, people feel like they have to say yes, they have to support, they have to validate. And a lot of leaders, I found, are seeking those moments of validation. It's just, I'm going to say something, and I want you may be like, well, I'm not sure if it works, but I think that's a good idea. Because guess what? You hold their promotion, you hold their pay raise, you hold all these things. And unless you are open to sharing that, realizing that some people come from societies and cultures and families that taught them to disagree with their leader or the person in authority was wrong. So it's up to us to first share that. Second is to reward disagreement. And what I mean, when I'm talking about compensation or pay people to disagree, but if you disagree with me in a meeting, Marcel, instead of immediately shutting you down, I may ask more questions. Oh, tell me what you meant when you said this, or tell me how that would work, Marcel. And then, you know what, Marcel, thank you so much for sharing that idea. It helped me to think of something else that I wasn't even processing before you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's a place of rewarding, because your people are paying attention and they're watching how did that person handle that person just disagreeing with them? Or did they go to a workshop and learn to ask that question, all right, to disagree with me? And last but not least, is to follow back up, reinforce it. So if it led to a strategic business result or an outcome, or it created a strategy that you wouldn't have got to without that dissent, even if it's 2 or 3 months later, come back in that meeting. And you know what, Marcel? And 3 months ago, you actually caused me to think differently about this perspective, and it led to us reaching this result. Thank you for doing that. That's the type of thinking we need in this company.
Yeah, there's positive.
Those are things. Yes, those are things that continue to drive the cultures, and our peoples are peaking up and saying, "Oh, that's actually rewarded here.
Yeah,
let me do that in a way that's honoring and respectful as well."
I love it. That's great. All right. So listeners are like, okay, are we ready for the 5 pillars? I don't know. Should we unveil and lift the curtains, or is this a good time to do it?
Yes. I love the 5 pillars. It's very practical and strategic.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, before we go to each of the 5, kind of like How did you come up with the 5? And then what's your vision for these 5?
Yeah, so I mean, these came out of research, and there really could have been 100 pillars, but one it would have been a book no one would have read. But these were the 5 pillars that we found were the most foundational, and that rose to the top for us. And the goal for these 5 pillars is to give people practical ways to lean into more respectful disagreements. This is not about being perfect. This is not about if I just use this tool, I'll be perfect forever. No, I still disrespectfully disagree with people, but I've gotten better and I spend less time doing it. So that's our true goal, is just really helpful ways.
Yeah, and Justin, these aren't earth-shattering as I call them out for you to kind of briefly go over them. They're not, and yet it seems like common sense, but it's not common practice. We don't see it enough. It's not habitual,
Yeah.
right? So it's sort of not on our radar screen. So we need to bring this into focus so we can practice. All right, pillar number 1. Here we go, folks. Challenge your perspective. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So this was the last pillar we added, but we realized it was the most necessary, because most conversations around disagreement, conflict deal with the disagreement and the conflict. But this pillar happens before any disagreement even occurs. And this is the pillar that's, how are you intentionally putting yourself in positions of learning about people, cultures, ideology, um, divisions and departments in the workplace that are different than yours, and even ones that you disagree with? And it's how often are we challenging our perspective? Now, why is this one important? It's because when we build up the muscles of consistently challenging our perspective, when we get into disagreements and people will share perspectives or thoughts that are different than ours, it's not our first time.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't hit us in such a negative way as it would if we never prepared and trained for it. It's almost like saying, I'm going to run a marathon and never training.
Mm.
And so challenging our perspective is helpful. Now, let me give strategy to this.
Yes.
One way is that we've been challenging leaders to cancel the open door policy, because they've often created open door policies while their doors have been closed. They've even done virtual office open hours. I'll be on Microsoft Teams from Tuesday to Thursday, 3 to 5 p.m. And what we've done is open door implies come to me. It's reactive. If you need me, I'm here. What if we shifted to an out the door policy? And with an out the door policy, we go to our people, right? I was just speaking to a client yesterday and doing some work, and they were like, yeah, it makes sense, but I don't spend enough time actually hearing the voices of the everyday people, the frontline associates, the people who are dealing with this, and not just about their work, but about their lives and who they are.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that we could do. You may say, Justin, that sounds great, but how do I do it? Well, let me give you a practical way to lean into it. One meaningful connection per week.
Mm.
What if you built into your calendar 15 to 20 minutes to actually say, you know what, I'm going to leave my office and I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a conversation with the custodial staff member. I'm going to have a conversation with one of my team members. I'm going to leave my home and actually have a conversation with my neighbor that may be outside raking their leaves. And these are the things that help us. If that's too much, then flip the W upside down and make it one meaningful connection per month. Maybe it's a lunch. The goal is that we often, without intentionality, will not challenge our perspective. And so that's one really practical way. The last thing I want to really quickly say is the Circles of Grace Challenge. And I created this for me because I was not living up to my mom's ideals. I was confining myself to my circles of comfort, people who looked like me, thought like me, believed like me. And with the Circles of Grace, I created to do this. That every 6 to 12 months, I go to events and experiences that I don't know a lot about or I disagree with. And I go asking 2 questions. What did I learn about this event, experience, and a person? And what did I learn about myself? And I've had some transformative Circles of Grace challenges. Leaders, you can do this with your team. We just took the Ford Family Foundation through this. And at the end of the 6 months, we did a debrief and people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had this all wrong. Or like, yeah, like they were what I thought they were, but it presented a humanity approach to it. So those are practical ways that we can lean into it. Leave the office, whether virtually or in person, lean into intentionally one meaningful connection per week or per month, and consider taking the Circles of Grace challenge.
I love it, and I love how you set up the way to break away from all this by challenging our perspective is to build relationships first. It's
Yes.
relational in nature because as we get to know people, we break out of our own false assumptions, stereotypes,
Yes.
wrong belief systems, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's love in action.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Pillar 2, and it's funny because as I was reading over the pillars, I could almost see a pattern of one leading to the other. Not always, but
Yeah.
maybe a
Yeah.
little bit of an overlap. Like to get to pillar 2, I have to challenge my perspective and learn and grow. So here is pillar 2 is be the student. Break it down.
Yes. And if we're able to get to it, I'd love to share with you how I did this with my absentee father, right? But pillar number 2 is be the students, where we focus more on listening and learning rather than lecturing.
Mm,
And oftentimes we go into these disagreements ready to prove our perspective. And one of my buddies, James Robliata, who studies curiosity, and I love this. He was like, "What if we listened to people like we were actually wrong?" And it really hit home because when we're the student, when somebody has information that you really want to know, like we approach it differently, right? We're like, "Oh my gosh, like tell me about that," or "Can you tell me like how you climb Mount Everest?" Right? Like, or so what did you do? What kind of tour company did you use? Or wow, you got that $1 million sale? Like what happened? How did you build a relationship with the client? And when we're the student, we can apply those same principles with people that we disagree with. The challenge is that we normally go into it with this illusion of asymmetric insight. And this is a psychological term that says, I think I know more about you than you know about me.
oof.
And it's like this, Marcel. Marcel, you're easy to understand, but I'm just complex. So I'm going to share with you my complexity. Well, I get you, I understand you. But when we're the student, we realize we need to ask really good questions. Not only asking really good questions, but we approach people from a place of let me learn rather than let me lecture. And so one really key piece of this is there's a theory called inverted U theory. And inverted U theory shows us two places that people don't learn effectively. One, when they think they know absolutely nothing, but two, when they think they know absolutely everything. And we have to challenge those two places to get on the U of actually learning about people.
Yeah. I know your mother taught you so much, but do you have a personal experience of being the student of your own learning as it applies to this whole thing about respectfully disagreeing?
Yeah. In being the student, it actually was part of my challenging my perspective, right? So, I had this really off view of police officers. I often, didn't like police officers, didn't value a lot of what was going on and what happened. And so I was like, Justin, challenge your perspective. So I, talked to one of my buddies at church, and he was a police officer, um, Officer Youngblood. And I was like, hey, I'd love to do a ride along. All right. And so went on a ride along, and like, late at night at Charlotte, like the 11 o'clock, 8 p.m. to like 2 in the morning shift.
Yeah.
And I was flabbergasted of how much we ask and expect of our police officers in that 3 hours
Yeah.
that I was there. And they were mental health professionals, they were security guards, they were family consultants. I mean, all of these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, proximity bred empathy for me.
Yeah.
And it gave me a new heart. And so I was just asking questions of Dan and Daniel, just like, hey man, like how does this happen? And what was your perspective when this happened in New York? And what was the general perspective of police officers? And he provided information that I had never known.
Mm.
Right. And it's simply because I chose to be a student versus, oh yeah, police officers, you know how they are.
Yeah.
And it gave me a deeper and better appreciation for police officers. Now, I'm still not a fan of the historic aspect of policing in
Sure.
this country based upon how it started, but the police officers and many that I met are doing their best and have a heart to serve and care for the communities.
Well, yeah. Yeah. There's so much we don't know, right? And what
Yes.
we don't know about police officers or law enforcement in general. And it could go both ways depending on where you are in the country, right? Race,
Yeah.
et cetera. Whew, okay. Pillar 3 is
Yeah.
cultivate your curiosity. And, you touched on that earlier, like, well, yeah, we should be curious. But we are not.
Yeah. We're not, and part of it is because we're not comfortable at times in our own positions. And when we're not completely comfortable, we don't want people to, well, we're not going to be curious about others because we're going to spend more time proving. It's interesting. Something that was unrelated, but that applies here is I realized a lot of my life, I spent so much time trying to prove my worth that I was losing opportunities of simply being my worth.
Mm.
And that's what we do when we're not curious about people. Because when we're curious, we fill in the gaps with curiosity rather than conclusions. And what's the saying? Curiosity killed the what?
Cat.
Yeah. And that's wrong. Conclusions killed the cat. It wasn't curiosity, right? And how can we be more curious, right? Because curiosity fills that. So number one, we have to understand why we're not curious. And it's because we think we know. Right, we call it the dotted line dilemma. And the dotted line dilemma, and I want to test this out with you, and I want you to answer, but I don't want you to think about it. I just want you to respond. Okay? All right. Marcel, what is the correct side of the road to drive on? Go. You're thinking
Right.
You thought about it too long, right? See? And this is it. Because you want to get that question right. And I love doing this live and in person. It depends on where I am in the world doing it, right? And I was doing something in Australia, podcast, and they were like left, and I was like, why? They're like, it's the safest side. I was like, what if you're in the United States? And they're like, well, that's the wrong side. In our context and what we have historically experienced, it impacts how we see the world. And so, if you've ever, some people, they've lived in countries that they've driven on both sides and they really struggle with it because they're like, wait a minute, I don't, but the person who's always lived and maybe has never traveled outside of the US or to countries that don't drive on a different side, they're like, oh, it's right. And they may know that there's some left-handed side, but that's not the right side to drive on. And that's what we do in our lives with people, in our workplaces. We make assumptions. We think this is why. Oh, this is why they turned out the project the way they did. Oh, this is why. Versus being curious.
Mm-hmm.
So here's how you're curious.
Mm-hmm.
We have to challenge what we call our double Dutch style of communication. And if for those that don't know double Dutch, it's two ropes, like whoosh, 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 and somebody waiting to jump in and is waiting for that perfect opportunity to jump in. And that's what we do in our conversations. We're waiting to jump in. We're waiting to share our perspective, our truth, our value, our thing, versus deeply listening to others. And so we give people a practical tool called the power of three. And the power of three is where you listen at least to the third level of the conversation. So I say, Marcel, how are you doing today? You're like, oh, I'm great. I'm great. I'm like, oh, I'm great too. That's power of one. Marcel, how are you doing today? I'm great. What makes you great? Oh, I heard this interesting bald head guy. I know that bald head guy. That's power of two. But if I added on to that, like what made him interesting? It dives into a place where we find more places of understanding and allows us to actually, one, to hear people better and watch this, but they also feel like they're being better understood because we're taking time to show love and action of deeply listening to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me up the ante here. If I'm a listener going, yeah, that sounds great. There's a lot of empathy in there. But I don't want to lose my power. I don't want to lose my belief system by giving away too much curiosity. What's coming back to me? So is there a balance where, yes, you can be curious about another person's perspective without maybe compromising your own values or beliefs? Because a lot of people might be scared of being too curious.
I love that. And I want to, if you allow me to give some grade to that statement, the fact that we said we're losing power by being curious is already starting at the wrong place.
Ooh, love that. Okay. Yeah.
We're already starting from the wrong place. I lost power because I'm curious. No, you didn't. You gained understanding. And if it's about power and winning and losing to you, we're already approaching it from the wrong heart.
Yeah.
And that's our challenge, is that we think this is a game of winning and losing. This is the battle. I have to get more power than you. When true leaders, they're willing to be curious. True, just human beings are curious. Marcel, people share things with me all day long. That's not going to change my mind. Like, I know there's some values that are very hard held, strong ideological beliefs for me, and I'm not going to change in those values. I may change how I approach it, but I'm not going to change it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. What is a harm in being curious to someone? What is the harm in saying, tell me more about that? How did you get there? It allows us to actually hear people's stories in ways that we would never hear people's stories. And it might create gray spots, but it also might just simply be a place of engaging. And you know what? It humanizes that person.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we're missing. We're more focused on power rather than humanizing others.
Exactly. And I think we're more, and the reason I state that is because I can see people not being curious enough to learn about someone else's perspective, because they might be afraid that that perspective they are listening might change their own minds about being right about a certain ideology.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's because they're afraid.
Yes, 100%. That's one of the things that we said, is that people aren't more curious is because they aren't confident in what they believe. And so, one of the things, so people don't know, I went to seminary. And one of the things that I really loved about one of the things they challenged us in seminary is they said, I want you to go to a mosque to hear a Quranic scholar. Not to shout them down, not to evangelize them, but just to hear and be. Now, I went to a very conservative seminary. It wasn't a liberal seminary, right? And it was, and some people like, why would I do that? Like, what's the point of that? I should be outside yelling at them. You need to convert. You need to convert. And what they were doing is like, let me show you that this is relational. This is about humanity. When's the last time that somebody changed their mind because you yelled at them or called them stupid or dumb?
Yeah.
It doesn't cost us anything to be curious, but we have to be convinced that truly by listening to someone and being curious allows us to actually plant a seed of respect in others. And again, I want to make this very clear, whether or not they do it back to us or not. It doesn't make it easier, but it is possible.
Yeah, it's unconditional. Yeah. Okay. Pillar number 4, seeking the gray.
Yeah. Seeking the gray, man. It's there's a lot of shades of it, as we all know. And seeking the gray is it's about finding these places of understanding. We call it the common ground land, not middle ground. I want to be very careful. Middle ground implies 50-50. And oftentimes it's not 50-50. Right. And a really good book that I had to read during my MBA was a book called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together. And it challenged this concept of A and B thinking, right? That I'm trying to go into the meeting and I have A and Marcel, you have B, and I'm getting allies. I'm getting Henrietta and I'm getting Sally, and you're getting Joe and you're getting Keisha, and we're telling, all right, I need you to back me up in a meeting. And we're going and creating these battles versus asking the question, what's C? What are these places that we can create together that didn't exist before, right? It's what we see with, what came with Apple, right? He took calligraphy and this normal UI and brought it together, and it created something that we had never seen before. It didn't have to be one or the other. It was and that's the thing that we go into conversations asking, what's the gray? What is something new that I may have learned, even if it's just about how that person got there? And so let me give you a great example from a societal perspective. Imagine there's two people that are having a big disagreement about gun rights and gun control. And one's like, you're stupid for not having a gun in the house. Why would you have it? And you're stupid for having guns in the house. Why would you? Versus, you know what? The starting point being, I'm really glad we both really care about the safety of our families. That imbues a different level of conversation when you start off from that place of common understanding and that common ground, rather than immediately going to the place where you are completely different. And so I love talking politics with people in person. And I'll share with people, I would never talk politics with people who couldn't tell me what they like about their opposing person and what they don't like about their own. Because I didn't feel I could we wouldn't have a really good, rich, great conversation. And now, even after the elections, when I hear people talking about this or that, and I start asking people, well, tell me what you like that's happening.
Yeah.
Tell me the things that are actually, and it's tough for people because it's so easy for us to operate in this black and white. It's either all good or all bad versus intentionally seeking the gray. And so as leaders, we have to we have to model that behavior for our team members. We have to ask those questions in those team meetings, like, hey, yo, what's the gray here? What can we get to if we took a little bit of what marketing said and what a little bit of finance, which are normally at times at odds, and what's the gray, or where's something that we can incorporate potentially a little bit of this and maybe a lot of this, or a mixture of this and this, and we get to a new idea that we had never come to before. That's seeking the gray.
Yeah. So it's basically avoiding binary thinking, polar
Yes.
opposite. Yeah, because that's what keeps us polar opposite. Yeah. I love that. It's considering all kinds of possibilities and multiple perspectives. And you even touched on the fact that sometimes it's embracing ambiguity. Like
Yeah.
they may not have the answer, and that's okay too. Um,
Yeah.
sometimes things are a bit uncertain, and so we wrestle through the uncertainty rather than start to demonize and dehumanize people.
Yeah. I love that you said that because there is such an ambiguity in our world and in our lives and in our workplaces. It's wrestling with how do we, for companies that want to return to work versus those organizations and employees who have said, man, I love remote. It's created a quality of life.
Yeah.
And instead of what we end up doing is we shout each other down. No, it's about returning to work. And this is most important. It's almost about staying at home and the quality of life versus actually asking the questions and trying to find a gray. How has remote work been really beneficial to your life? If I was the person that was returning to work, hearing their perspectives, their journeys, and asking, is there a gray? Even if you may have these return to work policies, that makes, and ask the questions, how do we continue some of those aspects of the quality of life that they had rather than it's my way or the highway? And so to your point, I think it's really important, but I want to say this again. We, it's intentional for us to go into the conversation, especially when we know it's a disagreement conversation. And even when we're in it, to ask, what's the C? What's the gray here? Because if we don't ask for it, our brains won't look for it. And our brains will spend more time trying to prove that person wrong versus trying to find the place of gray.
Mm, yeah. Okay. Last but not least, and I'm wondering if you meant for it to be sort of the last pillar that kind of without it, it's almost like a cornerstone pillar. I don't know. Well, anyway, here it is. Agree to respect.
Yeah. No, notice I didn't say agree to disagree. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. And they do it very disrespectfully
Mm.
or it's dismissive. Let's just agree to disagree. But they haven't taken the time to actually be the student of the other person, to be more curious, to find the gray places of understanding.
Yeah.
And agree to respect is all about how do we formulate our plan to humanize others. And so let me give you two quick ways to humanize others. One is what we call full acknowledgement. We call it a 3FA framework, that you can fully acknowledge someone whether you 100% agree, 100% disagree, or partially agree. And full acknowledgement is simply like this. Schwantes, Stanford researcher, came with a concept called thank you because. And thank you because, Marcel, thank you because I never heard somebody share it that way. And I feel like I'm grateful you chose to share it with me. Two, Marcel, wow, you mentioned three things, and I want to thank you because like number two really resonated. I still have to do more research on it, but I'm gonna dive into the research and I'm gonna get back to you. Or, wow, Marcel, this is a really tough conversation for us to have, and I thank you because you chose to have it and you didn't have to. And I want to appreciate you for doing that. Now, Marcel, not once did I say I agreed with you, but in each of those moments, I can still, if I've practiced the other pieces, it's not patronizing, I can fully acknowledge you. But we've often conflated full acknowledgement for full agreement. And so one practical way that we can lean into conversations is with full acknowledgement. Wow, wow, thank you for sharing your perspective on, this project. And wow, this could be helpful. I think that, your thinking is very innovative. It helps to kind of think how we can drive the company forward. Now, the other piece of that in agreeing to respect is not only agreeing to respect the other person, it's also agreeing to respect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, one of two things we have to decide. One, is the issue important enough for us to respond? We don't have to respond to every issue. We don't have to respond to every disagreement. We don't have to share our perspective to everything that somebody says. So we first have to ask, and I love somebody created this weight model, is why am I talking? Right? Hey, thank you for sharing that. And that's good. I'm good. I can go off and have another conversation because I left that person feeling fully acknowledged. But didn't say I had to change. But two, if we have an opinion that's different, that we feel needs to be shared, and it's meaningful, I want us to consider doing this. It's going to be countercultural. Ask to share your perspective. Why is it so hard? Because in society of social media, we don't have to ask to do anything. We just post. We just say the monologue. But instead, Marcel, if I said, you know what, Marcel, thank you for sharing that perspective. If I get it right, what you're saying is, if we give $1 million to this initiative, that it will help us to do this. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, absolutely. Like, wow, thank you. It helps me to understand a little bit better of your perspective. And Marcel, are you open to hearing a perspective from me that might be a little bit different? Now, what this just has done is, one, it psychologically allows that person to get ready to receive. I call it the dentist drill. If a dentist just started drilling in you without preparing you for what's going to happen, the way you feel it is different than when you can embrace yourself to prepare for it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we just go in without preparing people. So asking to share your feedback. And then the second piece of that, if they say no, old Justin used to burn a bridge. Well, I didn't want to talk to you anyway. Hey, newer Justin is learning to say, you know what? If you ever want to come back to this conversation, I'd love to, come back. Just let me know when you want to have it.
Yeah.
These are ways that we can agree to respect, but also respect ourselves in the process.
Man, that's good. So let's bring this full circle now that we've seen all the pillars in action, and and for us to maybe implement some of these pillars in the workplace, right? And helping to shape culture and all that. Have you seen a situation where these principles have made a huge impact in business or in someone's personal life?
Yeah. So both in business, I'll do two quick ones. Working, with the Fortune 100 company, and one of the senior leaders of HR, talked about, one of the ways he challenged his perspective is by joining an employee resource group that had nothing to do with him. And he was just like, I'm just going to go and I just want to learn. Right. And so it's like, I realized I don't know a lot about this group. I'd like to learn a lot. How does next? We're talking about leading it or doing any things. But what ended up happening is, in his 2 years of just being a student, challenge his perspective, being a student, being curious, asking more questions, finding out these places like, oh, I can see that. Oh, there's common ground here. Like, oh, I don't share that same belief, but I hear this. Is that he was able to imbue himself in such a way that he heard them in different ways. They heard him. They actually asked him to be their executive sponsor. And he was able to find that, their sense of belonging and engagement in the company was improved because he took an interest to actually be there to support. And they were like, wow, like no one has actually ever done this that's been outside of our group. And so from a business perspective, we're talking about engagement. We're talking about how people feel like, do they belong? It comes back. I mean, that's why I love the name of your podcast. It comes back to love in action.
Yeah.
Right? This is love in action, choosing to go and pursue and hear other people's perspectives and stories, even when it may not have directly anything to do with you, because it helps them to see there actually is somebody here who cares for me and creates a sense of belonging at work. Now, personally, I went through that with my dad.
Okay.
And my dad wasn't in my life. And, my parents divorced when I was 4. I would see my dad initially every other weekend and then 1 weekend a month. And then it became sometimes 2 or 3 years where I didn't see him or talk to my dad. And when I was younger, it didn't bother me as much. But as I got older, I remember sometimes I'd pull off to the side of the road and literally just start weeping uncontrollably because I felt like I missed something. And I'm not saying that people who grew up with both parents live the perfect life, because I've heard those stories too. But for me, I felt like I missed something. And so in 2019, I was going to go back to Ghana, and my dad had moved back at that time. I was going to go confront my dad. And I was going to tell him how angry I was, how disappointed, how sad, all these things. But instead of confronting him, I went to go hear his story. And two reasons that happened. One is because I have a really good therapist that I still have. So I encourage people to consider therapy because it's been extremely helpful, not as because there's something wrong with you, even though my kids may say something different, but to keep things going right. But also my leadership Charlotte cohort that I was a part of, that they helped me to see that approaching my dad in that way wouldn't actually be beneficial. So as I heard his story, and I love that, I want to say one participant, she shared, she said, Justin, they helped you turn a confrontation into a conversation. And I love that line.
Ooh.
As I heard his story, listened, first I challenged my perspective with my therapist in the leadership Charlotte cohort. I was a student because I asked my dad, I said, hey, Dad, I realized I never heard your story. I'd love to hear your story. I asked more questions versus immediately jumping in and saying, no, what you meant was, or, this is how it impacted me. I sought the gray and I tried to find these places of common understanding where I was like, wow, well, my dad did the best with what he had and what he could, and with the decisions he made at that time. And in agreeing to respect, I'm not saying this always leads to this, but I chose to forgive my dad, not because he asked for it, but because it was my choice.
Mm.
And as I forgave my dad, Marcel, what I didn't realize on the other side of forgiveness was an aspect of my Ghanaian heritage that I had been holding back all these years and didn't even realize I was doing it. And it literally washed over me appreciation for it. And it led to so many things in terms of now I take people to Ghana once a year, and we started a foundation. We're building a school and a clean water project. And none of these things would have happened, Marcel, without respectful disagreement. And so I tell people, you have no idea, whether in the workplace or at home, what's on the other side of respectful disagreement, even if it's simply just planting seeds of respect. I'll end my piece of this. And I love because builders recently highlighted them. But I've been telling this story about this guy, Daryl Davis, for a while. And for those that don't know, Daryl Davis is a black blues musician who befriends Ku Klux Klan members.
Yes.
And through his friendship, over 200 Klansmen have been reported to have turned in their robes, even some grand wizards that have made Daryl Davis the godfather of their children. He didn't go shouting them down. He didn't go telling them, you're stupid, you're wrong. He went to hear their stories, to befriend them, to find the common ground. He did these things. And so sometimes, what if we're just planting seeds, y'all? Did everybody turn in their robes? No. But you have no idea the impact that even when someone's not giving you the respect you think you deserve, what if we chose to give them the respect that they do?
Yeah, a lot to think about there, but that's such a great way to just bring everything really full circle here. And I can't think that just humbles me. So I'm going to be going over that story a lot more because it is a fascinating account of everything we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
All right, Justin. So as we wind down here and before we go into our speed round, is there anything we have not covered that you feel, oh, shoot, I wish I could get one more thing in?
Yeah. It's this whole concept of being open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been misused. Because there are things that every single one of us are closed-minded on. And the answer is not always, you just need to be a little bit more open-minded. I want to leave people with this, that even when we are closed-minded, may we never stop being open-hearted. That's true love in action.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, speed round. Here we go. You're on the hot seat a little bit.
I like hot seats. Let's go.
Best book you've ever read.
Ooh. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Oh, gosh. Of course. That should be on everybody's list. All right.
Yeah.
One thing you do to eliminate your stress.
I work out every day. I do something fitness related, and it's a part of my stress relief.
Best way to minimize conflict.
To listen to others deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Name a person, dead or alive, you'd like to have dinner with.
No.
Say that again.
Nelson Mandela.
All right. Your biggest hope for the rest of 2025.
That people would spend more time in respectful disagreements and less time on social media.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially with the last part, because it may lead to the first part. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. You have survived the speed round.
I'll tell my wife I'm no longer on the hot seat.
Okay, Justin, we bring it home with 2 questions as we do with every guest. The first one is the love question, tradition on the show. How do we lead with more actionable, practical love day in and day out?
By considering others. I'm gonna put it this way: by considering others as more important than ourselves. And what I mean by that, not that they're more important, but often many of us have high views of ourselves. What if we had similar high views of other people? And when we ask the question of how do I consider them and their perspective, their thought, their plight, their issue, I think it helps us in tremendous ways.
Fantastic. Okay, bring us home. One thing that that you'd like to walk us away with here. Let me do that again, Justin. 3, 2, 1. All right, bring us home. What's that one thing you'd like us to walk away with?
Consider doing a birthday challenge. And for those who know, a birthday challenge is something I started many years ago to keep myself in what Carol Dweck calls the growth mindset.
Yeah.
And it's simply every birthday I challenge myself to do one thing that I've never have done, but I've either considered or would consider doing. And it's led me to so much growth and understanding and learning. That's everything from running a marathon, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, becoming a level 1 sommelier, to learning how to sail, all these different things, learning how to cook. And it keeps life fresh, but it also keeps you humble. Because you realize when I learned how to ski and in my low 30s, and there was these little kids who were 7 and 8 that were just killing it down the mountain, like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I almost wanted to give up because I felt like I should have been better already. But it made me realize how much in life the learning mindset needs to be a part of our everyday, every year learning. And so I would encourage people to consider doing a birthday challenge, that it helps to rebirth every single year.
Love it. Love it. Folks, get this book. Apply the 5 principles. It's called I Respectfully Disagree. There's the cover. If you're watching on YouTube, How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. Justin, it's been a blast, man. If people want to connect with you, where can they go and learn more about what you do? Also about your foundation.
Yeah. So workmeaningful.com is the umbrella organization. For those who want to dive deeper into the foundation, workmeaningfulfoundation.org. It's where we donate 5%, minimum of 5% of our profits towards educational initiatives for underserved communities in Ghana and United States. And so those are the 2 places that are really paramount, but Work Meaningful will have all the information there. And then I love LinkedIn. I'm been spending less time on there after reading Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. But I'm on there, and Justin Jones-Fosu. So I'd love to connect and learn from you. And hopefully we can have mutual learning.
Excellent. Hey, it's been a blast, and I'm so glad that you finally came on the show. We're all better for it. Thank you so much. Justin, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a blast. We have learned so much from you. I know I'm better for it, and so are our listeners. Thank you again.
Thank you, brother.
You can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And look for my show notes. I'll have all of Justin's contact info and how to get a hold of him, how to get involved in this foundation. And you'll find all of that stuff, including a YouTube link to watch this very episode. And you can find all that at marcelschwantes.com. We'll see you next time, folks. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.